This is Kraftwerk, the band that has laid the groundwork for basically any popular music produced in the last 40 years. They are the most influential band that you've never heard of, who have planted a family tree of musical influence that stretches across all genres of modern music. Along with artists like Vangelis and Brian Eno, Kraftwerk pioneered early electronic and synthesized music and influenced the world over in their wake. Without Kraftwerk, we wouldn't have classics like Tears for Fears, Depeche Mode, or basically any other synth hit of the 80s. The electronic music scene would lose its founding block, and Drake would have nothing to dance to. But wait, if they were so influential, then how come nobody has ever heard of them? Well, Kraftwerk's story begins when Ralf Hutter and Florian Schneider met as students at the Robert Schumann Hochschule in Dusseldorf during the late 1960s. Kraftwerk began as a part of Germany's krautrock scene in the early 1970s, releasing 3 albums in an experimental rock style. These albums infused the rock and roll sound that was dominating the airwaves at the time with the experimental use of keyboards, organs, and post-production modulation. However, it was not before long that the band began fully embracing electronic instrumentation, including synthesizers, drum machines, vocoders, and self-made instruments, beginning with the release of their 4th studio album, Autobahn, in 1974. Hutter and Schneider were now joined by Wolfgang Fleur and Karl Bantos, and together the group crafted one of the first popular synth-pop albums.
Kraftwerk have a name for this. It's Maschinenmusik. The sounds are created at their laboratory in Dusseldorf, programmed, then recreated on stage with the minimum of fuss. This is Autobahn, based, say the group, on the rhythm of trucks, cars, and passing bridges heard while driving through Germany.
Kraftwerk's popularity continued to grow following the release of Radioactivity in 1975, which refined the synth-pop sound that the group had become known for. Radioactivity was a bilingual album that featured both German and English lyrics, and peaked at #1 on the French charts. During the tour for Radioactivity, the band began to make performance rules, such as not to be drunk on stage or at parties. Karl Bartos wrote about these rules, stating that it's not easy to turn knobs on a synthesizer if you are drunk or full of drugs. Kraftwerk began fraternizing with other popular musical artists at the time, including Iggy Pop and David Bowie, both of which have named the band as a major musical inspiration throughout their career. 1977's Trans-Europe Express was inspired by long train rides and was noted for being released in 2 separate versions, one sung entirely in English, one entirely in German. Trans-Europe Express has become Kraftwerk's most acclaimed release and has been hailed as one of the greatest albums of all time. The band fully embraced their artificial image with the release of The Man Machine in 1978, which contained 2 of their most popular hits, The Robots
We are the robots. We are the robots.
and The Model.
She's a model and she's looking good.
It's hard to imagine the 1980s without the synthesizer. It was an instrumental piece of musical technology that produced some of the most defining sounds of the era. So by the beginning of the decade, Kraftwerk's sound was just about everywhere. Kraftwerk's musical style and image was influential to just about every popular music act of the 80s, from Joy Division to Eurythmics to African Bambaataa, who are considered to be the godfathers of modern hip-hop. Although, the German influence did not come without its critics, including one journalist who characterized the sounds as the Adolf Hitler Memorial Space Patrol. Yeah. But Kraftwerk's sound wasn't just being built upon, it was also being repurposed and remixed into new music. The choir sounds found on Uranium were sampled in New Order's classic Blue Monday, one of the earliest examples of sampling in pop music. Kraftwerk released 2 more albums in the 1980s, beginning with Computer World in 1981. This album contained 7 computer-themed electro tracks that sound kind of silly to us now, but were musically groundbreaking at the time.
I'm the operator with my pocket calculator.
It is an early example of the musical style that would eventually evolve to become modern EDM, and has been cited as one of the best albums of the decade. The band's 8th album, Electro Cafe, was released in 1986 and featured primitive CGI renditions of the band on the cover art and in music videos. However, by this time, Kraftwerk was beginning to slow down as a group. Ralf Hütter was involved in a serious cycling accident that put him in a week-long coma, and spent less time with the band following his recovery. After he felt he was being replaced by electronic drum machines, drummer Wolfgang Flür left the band in 1987, and Karl Bartos left a few years later. With Kraftwerk's core quintet shattered, the band went on hiatus for several years. Kraftwerk began touring again in the mid-90s after finding replacements for Flür and Bartos, but have not released an album since the Tour de France soundtracks of 2003, which were designed to celebrate the centennial anniversary of the famous bike race. The band remastered and re-released their catalog throughout the 2000s and performed their experimental shows live across the world to this day. However, founding half Florian Schneider left the band in late 2008, leaving Hütter as the only remaining original member. Kraftwerk had become known for their futuristic and robotic sounds, politically charged music, and unorthodox visual style. The band has an air of mystery surrounding it, thanks to their reclusive nature and the experimental, avant-garde image they've created for themselves. The innovations in electronic music pioneered by Kraftwerk encompass practically every musical act since the late 70s, and their influence can be traced from almost every piece of popular music today. While most modern artists have evolved their sound beyond retro recognition, there are some contemporary musicians who continue to exemplify Kraftwerk's original style. Elements of these can be found in the vintage analog synthesizers and robotic personas utilized by Daft Punk, or the lo-fi visual aesthetic that accompanies the upbeat synth pop of Neon Indian. But no matter how you cut it, there is really no denying the effect that the German electro outfit has had on popular music. Their sounds help define the technological limbo of the 1970s and have carved out the way for countless new genres to evolve. Kraftwerk's mainstream popularity lies not with their original tracks, but with the legacy that lives on through the audio production of the modern era. Some journalists even consider them to be the most influential band in music history, even more so than the Beatles. Seriously. So next time you sit down to listen to music, just think about the family tree of audible influence that inspired your favorite artists. You'll probably find that they have a lot to thank for the 2 dudes from Dusseldorf. Also listen to Kraftwerk.